What if your brain could control augmented reality with just a thought? What if assistive devices could empower millions with ALS, stroke, or paralysis to communicate and interact like never before? Welcome to a game-changing episode of Neurocareers, Doing the Impossible, featuring a true visionary and innovator in neurotechnology, Andreas Forsland, founder and CEO of Cognixion. A year ago, Andreas shared his entrepreneurial journey with us, offering a behind-the-scenes look at building Cognixion, a groundbreaking brain-computer interface headset that merges BCI plus augmented reality AR to transform assistive technology. It was Cognixion ONE. Today, we're taking it even further. This time, Andreas is back to discuss the latest advancements in the world of BCIs and assistive reality, offering an exclusive glimpse into the future of a $320 billion market, supporting people with over 400 neurological conditions, from ALS to autism. He'll reveal the inside scoop of Cognixion's FDA-designated breakthrough device, a BCI-AR headset already in use at major medical institutions, the convergence of brain signals, AI, AR, and assistive tech to create truly hands-free control for people with ALS, MS, and spinal cord injuries, and the role of patents and IP in sharing the future of neurotechnology and how Cognixion is using over 50 global patents to drive industry change. Job market predictions for those looking to join the future of assistive technology, AR and BCIs. Learn where your skills could fit in this fast-growing field. And I hope we will be able to touch on the ethical considerations surrounding privacy, security in a connected world. And we just had an amazing podcast on that specific topic. Welcome, Andreas. It's a great pleasure to have you today on our podcast. Thank you for coming again. And can you please briefly introduce yourself to those listeners who might be not listen to our previous podcast? Thank you.
Absolutely, Milena. Thank you. My name's Andreas. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. You understand that I'm the founder and CEO of Cognixion. A bit about where we are. We're headquartered in Santa Barbara, California. We also have an R&D technology center in Toronto, Ontario. So we are in two countries. And me personally, prior to starting Cognixion, I've worked for about 30 years almost in technology, from the first version of the internet through second and third. And here we are into the next generation of computing. So I'm happy to be here, happy to tell my personal story and how that relates to the work we're doing. But more importantly, just an announcement, we have started to commercially ship our technology in 2024. So we're very excited to talk about the product that is available today, and it's going to be available worldwide in the new year. So yeah, what else could I talk about, Milena?
So that's an amazing development. And of course, your experience over the years, so you're leading the change. And with Internet 1, Internet 2, yes, and now with the BCIs, it's amazing. How does it feel to be on the wave of innovation?
Well, I feel like we've become the 10-year overnight success because we saw this time coming as far as this convergence of major trends. So thinking about the convergence of wearable computing, thinking about the convergence and miniaturization of microcontrollers and microcomputers and electronics as far as wearables, and the advances in neural networks. And we knew that neural networks would eventually be able to be run on resource-constrained devices, not just big cloud systems. So being able to run ML and AI on device. And so here we are, we've been working diligently to build a very elegant wireless hands-free BCI that has integrated augmented reality capabilities all in one system. And we have built an SDK, like a development environment where you can build apps on the headset that you can explore all kinds of areas of neuroscience, rehabilitation, diagnostics, therapeutics. I think about a validated hardware platform that you could take into any healthcare environment and know that it's designed to medical grade standards. so that you don't have to worry about the hardware. You can just focus on building amazing software that you could address hundreds of different neurological conditions.
That sounds absolutely amazing. So it means that people can use your device and in clinical settings, and also they can do a lot of different experiments, use it in research. Do I understand that correctly?
Exactly, Melina. We launched the product. Actually, I was in Europe this summer. We soft launched some announcements at Vivatech Paris, and I was at the AI for Good conference in Geneva, Switzerland, and then also was in Italy with the Aspen Institute Italia, speaking about AI and diplomacy. And then I was recently in Malta, focusing on medical technologies, where we won Startup of the Year. And so we have been doing a bit of international promotion, I guess, as far as what our platform is and what it's going to be. And then we just started shipping the technology itself. It's called Axon R.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the Cognixion ONE
Mm-hmm.
Axon R. And so the predecessor to the Axon R is the Cognixion ONE Axon, which is the version of our system that's in front of the FDA right now. The Axon R, the R represents research.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the research version of our
Mm-hmm.
system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a slightly different version. You can see it on the website, but we started shipping Axon R in September. And Axon R is already in use by over a dozen major health systems in the United States, including Johns Hopkins, Mass General Hospital, Brown University, BrainGate, et cetera, et cetera. So we have really great partnerships with health systems and specifically the neurology departments. So the neurology departments in health systems are purchasing our Axon R, and they're doing rapid prototyping of software
Mm-hmm.
for different kinds of applications. And what's great about that is that because it's designed to medical grade standards and it's for research purposes, they can feel comfortable taking those concepts that they've developed on our headset, and they can take it all the way through clinical trials.
Oh.
All of this is difficult work. Anyone on your podcast would know that building hardware is hard, doing software is hard, acquiring data is hard. We're just trying to take some of the hardest parts away so that folks that are on your podcast that are probably more leaning towards data science, computer science, more towards neuroscience, they can focus on what they're great at and not having to worry about system level engineering stuff. So we're very excited about that. And what's coming up in 2025 will be some very exciting stories and announcements that we're going to be releasing in the first half of the year about some of our customers and some of the work they're doing. And also the availability of our technology, not just in the US and Canada, which it's available today in 2024, but also it's going to be available internationally. And so we'll be talking more about that in the new year, about which countries and so on.
I'm looking forward to those announcements. And we also have Neurocareers news live updates on LinkedIn. Maybe you will be willing to join us and give that live update to all our LinkedIn listeners. We have so many of them that are joining our events. So this is just something I wanted to mention if you decide to go with that. But yes, amazing developments. Let's give our listeners a brief overview of what is the history behind the device, because I think there is a big connection between now clinical use and how you started, which was based on events in the clinic. Yes, what prompted you to develop the technology. So if you can give that glimpse of how everything started.
Yeah. As a reminder, prior to starting Cognixion, I was not a neuroscientist. I'm not sure if your audience can relate to that, but I came into the neuroscience field from a different perspective. My background is user experience, human factors, branding, marketing, so much more on the creative side. I've always been involved on creating user experiences and understanding that success or failure of any novel technology comes down to whether it's usable or not and whether people like to use it. And so what we found is that there was a lot of really fabulous technology in the neurotech space, but most of it is unusable. It's really, really difficult to use. When you think about the consumer standards, so when you think about just going online and ordering a product and it arrives and you open the box, you unwrap it, you start using it, you want to be able to just get up and run and start using it. And most technology in the neurotech space is not designed to do that. And we're trying to bring that perspective to it. But what got me into the field was a personal situation. My mom came to visit us in California for her birthday. She was turning 70, which was a big birthday. And when she flew in and arrived, she wasn't feeling well. And it turned out that she had developed pneumonia. But she was 70 and she had other comorbidities or other complications. And so that pneumonia accelerated and she had to be admitted into the intensive care unit at the hospital, the ICU. And when she was admitted, they had to intubate her, which meant that they had to put in a breathing system in her throat and mechanical breathing to support her. And that rendered her unable to speak because she was mechanically unable to speak. And also because she was put on life support, she was restrained. So imagine your arms are strapped to the side of the bed. So imagine you're strapped to the side of the bed and you have a tube in your throat and you can't talk and you're alone in a room and you don't know anybody, and how scary that is and how much you want to communicate and you can't. And so you're just exploding inside wanting to say things and you just aren't able to. And so that was my experience, was when I was by her side, I could interpret her body language. I could look at her eye movements. I could ask her to make grunts or sounds or hand squeezes. And so in a matter of a few hours, through just interactions with nurses and doctors and me being her translator, we had sort of created our own little language of communicating with each other. Over several weeks, she recovered. The intubation was extubated and she was able to be discharged with a long rehabilitation cycle. So that was a firsthand exposure of a traumatic event that rendered someone temporarily critically disabled and had to go through the entire rehabilitation process to kind of a new normal, going from ICU to the step-down unit to being discharged to full-time skilled nursing to being discharged to home care and then discharged to inpatient rehab, et cetera. So there's a long cycle that comes that, you don't realize that pneumonia, as common as it is, has a massive effect on people's lives, even in just a single event. And there's a long road for recovery for some people. So that's kind of a little bit about my personal story about what got me into it. But about a year later, that stress and anxiety as her communication partner was really weighing on me. And I had gone to a startup event, like a hackathon. I normally show up to these things to be a mentor and help with some of the teams, just give advice and counseling. And it just occurred to me, I said, well, why don't I just pitch an idea? And so I pitched an idea for a small little product. It wasn't a brain sensor. It was a handheld little device that resembles a rock or a stone. And in fact, I have one here. So the whole Cognixion journey started with a product called Smart Stones. And it looks like this. It looks like a little river stone. And the idea was touch control. And so I created this really cool, very beautiful river stone. And in this stone, we engineered this beautiful walnut. So what we found is when I worked at Philips prior to starting this company, I was involved in the team that integrated Lifeline when Philips acquired the Life Alert pendant, the senior pendant for I fall and I can't get up. I know that business quite well. And what I realized is most seniors don't want to wear medical devices. They don't want to wear things because it reminds them that they're not well. And most people don't want to have a talisman or a reminder that they're not well. And the reason being is that they look like a medical device. So I wanted to create something kind of like that was akin to that business model where you had a small little device, you pay for the device, and then you pay for the service, texting service kind of. And this would be a wearable pendant, or it could be something you could just keep in your pocket. And you could just put it on this charger. So this is a fully inductive walnut charger. This is all before Apple Watch or any of this stuff. And so this little pendant, you can see the grooves on it. And so it's concave and convex. And so it's asymmetrical in every way. So we spent a lot of time thinking about it's small enough for really small hands, but not too small for big hands. You always know which way is the right way to hold it. And even if your eyes are closed, you know where the top, middle, and bottom are on this. So, and this surface is a touch surface. So and it's a Bluetooth connected device to an iPhone. So what we created was a speech app on an iPhone. And this was the remote controller. So you could have a bunch of macros where you'd say a swipe up is a gesture to trigger a certain phrase for swipe up. A swipe down generates a trigger for a different phrase to be spoken. A double tap, a swipe, a circle. So you could program this with different primitive gestures and it would trigger phrases to be spoken out loud in any sort of voice or language you want on an iPhone. And that's where we started. But what we realized was that it was very beautiful, but it was almost like 10 years too early,
Mm-hmm.
So the current generation of seniors really are barely comfortable with computers. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're really like, this is really ideal for the next generation of seniors. But as a result of creating this product, we learned a lot about the community. We learned a lot about the industry. We learned a lot about healthcare. We learned a lot about reimbursement models and insurance.
Yeah.
We learned a lot about the longevity of a product once it's
Mm-hmm.
purchased and why people use it or not use it. So if you think about this, it was almost like a sacrificial prototype of a product because it enabled us to have very controversial probing questions in the market, which gave us the answers to the real problem we were solving. So what we did is we retired this product, set it aside for future, like we could bring it back to market later. But as a result of this, we realized that we said, in order for us to create a scalable
Mm-hmm.
solution, because we tried the stone out with seniors, with
Yeah.
people with dementia, children with autism, cerebral palsy,
Mm-hmm.
SMA, adults with Parkinson's, traumatic brain injuries, like all kinds of things. We even went to the Braille Institute, which is somewhere some of the insights came from for the tactile surface. And we had people that were blind that wanted to use this as an interface because it's like they don't need a smartphone, they need a tactile interface. So we learned a lot about many different conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But what we realized was that with every single healthcare condition
Mm-hmm.
required a lot of unique personalization. So if you wanted to create a communication interface for someone with autism, it had a really specific set of sort of
Mm-hmm.
preferences or settings that you would need to design for. Or if you had someone that had ALS, where it's a neurodegenerative condition, they would have a set of requirements. And so if you
Yeah.
collected the user requirements from all of these different kinds of conditions, what we stepped back at and said, how can we create a platform that we could create one system that everybody could use? And that personalization would happen in the software, not the hardware. And so by focusing on being market
Mm-hmm.
first, market led, and working backwards to the science and technology, we arrived at the brain computer interface. We said, well, everybody has a brain, everybody has a
Mm-hmm.
head. What are the most
Mm-hmm.
robust, universally accessible ways to allow many people to get into a system to be able to use for
Mm-hmm.
communication or other needs? And so obviously we went to BCI. And it was actually, I think, even before it was called BCI, you just called it EEG. And so we took our app that we had created with SmartStone, where you could tokenize phrases. And instead of the stone, we paired it with an off the shelf EEG headset. And so I had called Tan Lee, who is at Emotive, CEO of Emotive,
Mm-hmm.
and we got a discount on a version of the Emotive headset. And we put it into a quick trial. And so we replaced the stone and we trained a few people to see if they could do the mental imagery stuff. And it turned out that they could. Now, certainly you couldn't do as many gestures with the Emotive EEG system as you could with our SmartStone. Our SmartStone supported over 40 unique gesture inputs and combinations. So you could combine gestures and it was almost like a sign language. You couldn't do that with an off the shelf consumer EEG system. And so what we realized was that when we went through the original testing, we had to create something that provided a faster learning curve for people that they could, in the software, they could learn to use it very quickly. And that you had reliability, like what they learned would consistently do what it was supposed to do. And you find that's quite difficult with off the shelf EEG. And so we realized early on that we would have to produce our own EEG hardware. And so that became a necessity because there was nothing that provided the low level support that we needed from an engineering perspective to ensure that we had the quality we needed and ensure that we had the ability to tune the firmware and the models that are running the classifiers on it so that it could be an extremely reliable system. So early on, we decided, okay, we're going to create our own BCI. But what we realized in the course of this learning was that our goal was accelerate the learning curve for people. And oftentimes the people we were trying to serve with BCI, some of them had developmental conditions, disabilities, had trouble with memory, had other things. So it made it even a bigger, more challenging lift to say, we had to make it not just easy, but really easy, right, to learn. And so as a result of that, we learned through special education, K through 12 special ed, that it's all about the frequency, like of opportunities. So if you're thinking about communication access for children with disabilities, oftentimes a child that's unable to speak unintentionally is marginalized. So when the kids go out on the playground, oftentimes if a child can't speak, most of the kids know that they can't speak, and most of the kids don't speak to them. So you lose the opportunity to try and practice communication as someone who's a non-speaker. And so the lack of opportunities for frequency of attempts to communicate, the only way to address that is by engineering a closed loop system, right? That you have a rapid system that can take brain data, intention, and an application that can respond. And it gives many, many attempts to the user to move very quickly to interact. And so that created that user requirement of a closed loop system. This was in 2016. So we said we have to create a closed loop system. But at the time, the only closed loop systems then were mobile devices or very, very expensive VR systems. And so that's when we realized we had to combine a proprietary augmented reality headset. Like we had to create the AR headset too. So we realized, we're going to have to not just do the BCI, but we're also going to have to do the AR so that the user has a wearable display. And the computing has to happen on device too. You can't rely on some other computer. So that's when we fully realized in 2017 that we just had to build the hardware, like full stop. And so the reason why we've combined AR with BCI isn't because it's like just cool. It's because it's the right architecture to enable rapid learning for plasticity in the mind and allows people many, many attempts to interact with applications or graphics or things like this. So that's sort of the long sort of story about how we got to where we are. And there's a tremendous amount of breadth and depth in why our system is what it is. And I think there's a sort of a zeitgeist internationally within the sphere of like, of course you would want to put VR and BCI together. It's the perfect combo. Well, we concur. We concur because it's the best. Now, the reason we're doing augmented reality and not virtual reality is because we found that a lot of people that are vulnerable because they have a physical or a cognitive disability are very sensitive to being claustrophobic. So having a VR system with the potential of being locked in, like imagine the battery dies on the headset and then it's all dark. You don't want that. And also as someone who is a patient, as a professional or a caregiver, you want to be able to quickly see the status of someone's face. And like they say, you can communicate with your eyes quite a bit with your facial expressions if you're scared or happy or tired. And so the ability to not just see out, but the ability to see in and see the user's eyes was critical from a user requirement perspective. So all of that being said, there is no better combination for assistive platform that combines BCI with AR with applications that can do many things that support someone throughout the day.
Thank you so much. Do you have the system to see where you went from the stone and where you are now?
Yeah, I have a version on my shelf, and I also can share slides if it's helpful.
Yes, that would be awesome.
So this is the Cognixion ONE Axon. So this is the version that has been presented to the FDA for breakthrough device designation. So as you can see, it's a fully self-contained AR visor. And if you sort of peek through here, you can see through the lens. It's also tinted. So we've made it very easy with magnets to be able to remove the lens and replace the lens. So there's no learning required. And it's very easy for someone who maybe has neuropathy to be able to pull the lens off and put it back on themselves. So cerebral palsy and things like this. And it's designed to be extremely comfortable. So that's the Cognixion ONE Axon.
And we have electrodes on the front and on the back?
This one is only on the back.
Only on the back. Okay.
So on the Axon, it's only on the back. Yeah. What I'm going to show you on the screen here is the Axon R, which is available today.
That research version that you talked today about?
So there are over 400 unique neurological disorders, according to NIH, the National Institutes of Health. You can go online and check them out. But if you think about the long tail effect, where you have hundreds of conditions, only maybe 1 to 5% of those conditions get the most funding and have the most
Mhm.
support. And so there's a lot of conditions that don't have adequate diagnostics or any kind of adequate therapeutics or even abilities to do assessments to properly diagnose someone. So there's an opportunity for software applications to expand the efficacy of diagnostics and therapeutics for hundreds of neurological conditions that are currently being unserved.
Mhm.
But if you look at the ones that are currently being served quite in a lot of investment, they also match up with our core audience. But what we've done is we've invested tremendous resource and time and energy in creating a really remarkable hardware platform, the Cognixion ONE.
Mhm.
But what we realized was when we announced the speech version of this, the Cognixion ONE that's in front of FDA, we got a lot of inbound requests from health systems to say, we love your system. Could we use it for this use case or this use case or this use case? And we realized that we ourselves were not experts in all those different use cases. However, we were expert in human factors, expert in software, hardware, user experience design, building a platform. And so we had created the Axon R for ourselves. It was a rapid prototyping internal development tool so that we could move
Yeah.
very quickly and build apps and try things out. And so we decided to
Yeah.
commercialize the Axon R so that others could not be encumbered with having to raise large investments, and they could focus on
Mhm.
raising a more appropriate, a smaller investment amount to build an application. So lowering the bar to entry for entrepreneurs, small teams that could actually tackle passion projects across the board. Also, as an investor, it's very risky if you're investing in a single point solution. Like if you're going to invest in one diagnostic, you have to get that one diagnostic device approved through FDA, and then you have to get reimbursement coding, and then you have to educate the market. So there's a lot of risk in just doing a single medical device. But if you can take that risk away and say, I don't need to invest 25 to $100 million in a single point solution, I can invest in a hardware platform and spread my bets as an investor. I could invest in 10 software as a medical device applications for the price of one diagnostic device. So you can see how this is really going to be a catalyst for transforming the neurology industry. And if you couple that with the shortage of neurologists compared to how many people have mental health and functional brain health conditions, in the United States, there's about 60 million people that have diagnosable medical health conditions that are going untreated or improperly diagnosed and improperly medicated. It's about 23% of the entire US adult population. These are adults. If you think about pediatric kids that are 18 and under, you might double this number. But then if you think about how many neurologists there are only 15,000 neurologists that are actively practicing in the United States. And of that, most of them are in dense urban environments, metropolitan environments.
Mhm.
But when you go out into the field, like into the Midwest and Texas and Nebraska and Minnesota, you have very few neurologists that are in those areas, and people living are very spread out. And so here, there's only 69 reported practicing neurologists that live in rural areas in the entire United States. That's inadequate to support having so many people with neurological conditions that can't get care or can't take the time to drive 4 hours to go to a clinic. So you look at that and say, this is another reason why our system as a platform is important for unlocking applications that can be deployed and more easily accessible to people that can't get to a neurologist. I was talking a bit about personalization. So every brain and every nervous system is unique. It's beyond a fingerprint, right? It's a multidimensional individualization. And this is where the
Yeah.
role of AI, digital twins of the user, digital twins of their built environment, of their home, of their city, of their neighborhoods. These are interesting innovations that can play into what we're doing. Enhanced decoders for different kinds of neurological activity in the brain and in the peripheral nervous system and muscles, unique classifiers. So all of these things that are in the fine print here are things to consider when you're having to solve such a hard problem like we're trying to solve. And these are also the areas where I would say if you have people that are looking for careers, these would be the places to start looking. So working in AI, working in building digital twins, working in unique classifiers that are very high quality, working with hardware and sensors, understanding that the lines are going to be blurred over the next 2 decades. When implants start to come online in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be more need for interoperability between systems, between implants and non-invasive. And then if you are not interested in the foundational stuff, but you're more interested in the application side of things, there's going to be a huge need for assistive applications for everything from walking, exoskeletons, prosthetics, rehabilitation, wellness applications just for general checkups and self-service kind of health and wellness diagnostics, therapeutics. So we're entering a period where sort of software ate the world is kind of the meme from Silicon Valley around many industries, and software has disrupted many industries. And I would say software is now going to disrupt many inadequate and analog methods of healthcare delivery. So the digitization of neurology is really what Cognixion is developing. And this image you see on the right is just one snapshot of an internal wiki that we have created regarding just immense research and data around addressable populations that have unique clinical needs. So we have a deep, deep knowledge at Cognixion about over 150 different conditions. And that's only 150 out of the 400. So there's many more that need to go there. This table here represents the conditions that we're focused on from top to bottom. So you can classify different conditions into a few buckets. One would be acquired conditions that occur. So you're healthy and then all of a sudden something happens and then you're not. So stroke, traumatic brain injury, aphasia is very, very common, spinal cord injury or amputation. Degenerative conditions that are genetic in nature and they tend to come up midlife. So in your late 20s, mid 30s, early 40s. Alzheimer's and dementia is something that shows up. Parkinson's, MS, spinal SMA, PMA, PSP, and ALS. These are all MND or motor neuron disorders. And then you have neurodevelopmental conditions that happen typically in vitro or genetic in nature, and there's not much that you can do about it other than build and identify it early in life and then provide the right supports as that child develops. Things like autism, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, Huntington's. And there's a whole bunch of just rare conditions, including some of these like Rett syndrome and PLS and some of these others. But if you look at this in the US, just the adult population with these conditions represents 25 million. And these are chronic conditions. These aren't one-time things like my mom's pneumonia. These are conditions that require technologies that these individuals can access throughout the day, every day, forever, as opposed to just going and getting a scan at a clinic or an urgent care. So we sort of say there's a distinction between chronic and subchronic use cases. Chronic use cases are things you'll need all day, every day, and subchronic represent things that are 30 days or less. So you might go to an urgent care and you might get a prescription of something to do for 30 days, which includes neural rehab or other kinds of exercises or some other combination of digital therapy plus medications. So there's chronic and subchronic use cases. But when we look at this, we think that about 4 million American adults are absolutely going to be able to access this technology. But kind of coming back to the whole FDA regulatory side of things, Apple's an interesting case study for us at Cognixion because they've done an elegant job of separating hardware from software and having a corresponding regulatory strategy for each of those. So hardware is not regulated, like Apple Watches, AirPods, iPhones, iPads, MacBooks. They are not FDA cleared hardware devices. They don't need to be. They're designed to extremely high quality standards, and they have very rigorous security and third-party developer approvals and checks and quality management in place. But the hardware is really agnostic to regulatory. However, because they have such good hardware, app developers can build really great healthcare and clinically validated apps like for epilepsy or sleep apnea, or now you've heard that they have a FDA cleared API and accessibility settings within iOS that you can now take AirPods and convert them into hearing aids. And so now all of a sudden they have completely disrupted the audiology industry, not because of the hardware, but because the hardware unlocks high quality software. So we're doing the same thing for the nervous system. This is the Axon R, and it is designed to medical grade standards, but it's not a medical device like the Axon is. So the Axon R is designed with extra capabilities beyond, which we've basically, for this research version, we've taken everything we've learned in the Cognixion ONE XR, and then we've applied it here, and then we've expanded the capabilities. So not only is the Axon R an AR headset that runs Android, but it has speakers, it has visual display, it has haptics for tactile feedback. It also has communication technologies, including Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and 5G cellular. So it can be taken anywhere in the world. And as opposed to the rigid backstrap that you saw here in the original Cognixion ONE, we've switched to flexible backstraps, and we've separated them so that you could separate the occipital from the parietal, and you could adjust the top strap to go all the way up to the motor cortex. So you have full flexibility to take the electrode sensors and put them wherever you want them, depending on what application you're doing. So it provides more flexibility for developers. All of the neural computing is happening in this hip pack that we've created that's about the size of 2 iPhones stacked together. So it's a pretty small hip pack, and it handles all of the processing of neural data. And it's its own brain computer that we've created. But we expanded the front end so that we can support 2 analog front ends. One is for the brain, and then the other is can be connected to this dendrite cable. And these sensors are bipolar. So these can be used for additional EEG channels on the prefrontal or anywhere else on the head that you would like to put them. Or you can individually pick each channel and you could use them for different things like EMG for muscular activation. You could use them for EKG for heart rate variability. You can use it for respiratory, breathing, motion. You can use it for EOG on the face. So the dendrite cable unlocks the full physiology of the body. So the Axon R is actually a research platform that acquires brain and central and peripheral nervous system data, combines all of that through the same processors, and then gives you access to build applications either on device or off device, like using Python and other things, where you can prototype things very, very quickly using BCI Studio. So you can acquire the data, know that it's very high quality, it's being processed at any number of speeds that you want, and you can adjust that quality and whether you want it raw or filtered or any kind of transformation before you're working with it. You can push classifiers on. You can write custom apps in Unity for the device. So if you wanted to have a game, you could build a game and you're interacting with it. If you wanted to have a keyboard, you could build a keyboard. If you wanted to have the headset control a robot across the room, you could build an app to control the robot, and your brain is controlling the app that controls the robot. So it's really a fantastically flexible research platform. And so within the healthcare space, like I said, sort of in summary, we started with assistive tech, but now we have healthcare systems that are using our system to research and build applications for like monitoring, neural monitoring, sensor fusion, combining our EEG system and head tracking with other implanted data, telehealth. So the ability to have 5G support for like remote avatars for like telehealth and telepresence for doctors for rural use cases, assessments for different things, intraoperative, attention-based, concussion, ophthalmology-based assessments, and real diagnostics and therapeutics regarding your vision system, neurology, degenerative conditions, brain damage. So those are some of the things that our customers are doing. We are planning to roll out a suite of applications for assistive reality. So we are going to be releasing a conversational application that is AI powered, that has a digital twin of the user. We'll tell you more about that maybe in a future podcast. We also have a mobility product application that's in motion right now. And we're doing this in partnership with the university in Canada, as well as a major disabilities foundation to build an integration between our headset and the wheelchair itself, powered wheelchair system. Amazon invested in us a couple of years ago. And so we have Alexa available to us. Not just that you can speak to Alexa, but actually Alexa is running in our software stack. So we can integrate Alexa deeply in the user experience as opposed to having it be some extra system. And there's going to be some very interesting stories that are going to be told coming up in 2025 and 2026 about prosthetic arm control and other kinds of rehabilitative interfaces for robotics and prosthetics. So these are things that we're working on right now that we're going to tell you more about. Some of the healthcare products that are being studied and going into clinical trials at health systems include disorders of consciousness. So working with locked-in patients or folks that are maybe in a vegetative state, traumatic brain injuries, including concussions, as well as mental health diagnostics. So these are just some of the things that people are starting to work on. And you can see the magnitude of patients on an annual basis. So this is prevalence of 800,000 people per year are admitted into the hospital, into ER for unconscious. 800,000 per year are admitted into the ER and they're unconscious. 2.5 million emergency room visits in the US are concussion related. Incredible amount of impact if you could allow for people to have concussion diagnostics before they have to go to the ER. So many opportunities here.
Thank you so much. Yes, and I think that's a very nice slide. Another you show where is the place of Cognixion in a row of other companies like Neuralink, Synchron, Paradromics, Precision, BlackRock. Maybe you can comment on that. What do you see right now and what do you see in the future? Because you mentioned that there will be kind of a blend in between non-invasive and invasive technologies. It's very interesting that you positioned here on the slide Cognixion in a row of companies with implantable devices. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. Well, all of these implant companies are working with the FDA to try to find a way to hurry up and get their sensors cleared so that they can be used commercially. Well, all of these sensors are focused right now on the motor cortex. So there's some geographical limitation on the brain where most of the first versions of these systems are all going to be on the top of the head. And these sensors all have to route the data to a transponder that has to communicate wirelessly the data from the brain to a computer. And that computer has to recognize the data that's coming from the brain implant. And they have to distinguish the data coming from the brain implant and that it's different than other data that it's seeing. So there has to be essentially an API interface where the sending and receiving of data is secure wirelessly between the computer and the transponder. And once the data gets into the computer, at the application layer, what applications are you controlling? So all of the implants are right now, I believe, narrowly focused on getting cleared as a BCI for computer control. And so computer control is effectively the ability to control a mouse and keyboard. And so when you think about that, all of them will need a computer. All of them will need a display. All of them will need a suite of applications. And all of them will be giving their patients a user experience that's either delightful or very cumbersome. And so when you think about that, I'm just picking out a few of these. Synchron and the Stentrode has received a tremendous amount of investment funding, but it's more or less a switch. It's an on-off switch. Effectively, what the Synchron does is it captures and decodes very gross movement of, say, kicking a soccer ball or swinging your arm like a tennis racket or a golf club. So you have to imagine a very big, dramatic physical movement that you can recall doing before you were paralyzed. And it records that as a repeatable mental image. And it's programmed to a keystroke on the computer. So it's like a hit the space bar. So all Synchron is doing is effectively decoding like a big muscle movement and hitting the space bar. So it's extremely rudimentary what you could do with a stentrode. And I'm not dismissing the brilliance of the strategy of going through the vein and as opposed to a craniotomy and whatnot, but it is very limited. So Synchron relies heavily on the computer and the pre-existing settings on the computer. So the demonstrations that Synchron has given publicly on television and videos and stuff, most of the delight in the patient delight is because they can click a spacebar and tab through buttons using the native accessibility settings on an iPad or an iPhone. And so that's the sort of bare minimum of what you would expect to be able to do. Neuralink is more like a mouse. So Neuralink can do everything that Synchron can do as far as a click, but you can also measure, because of the high electrode count, you can measure gestures. So you can measure the ability to move up or down or left or right or across. And so you can move the mouse or move the cursor around a display, and you can select things. And so that's fantastic, right? It is still limited to 2 dimensions, X and Y coordinates. But Cognixion, we support sensor fusion of EEG plus head tracking plus eye gaze and the click. So we offer a 9 degree of freedom solution out of the box with no surgery required. So we believe that Cognixion is going to dominate the market in the sense of more people will want 9 degrees of freedom over 2 degrees or 1 degree. And most will want to have access to a suite of applications that do more than just communicate or do more than just click a mouse or click a keyboard.
And here on the picture, you have a game controller. If Synchron had a switch, yes, you have a mouse near a Neuralink, and you have game controller with the Cognixion system, yes, so with more degrees and possibilities.
Exactly. So this is the uniqueness of it. So if you're kind of comparing implants versus non-invasive, this would be a good graphic to reference. We've been testing with hundreds of people already, not single digits, but hundreds of people. And so here's a person with stroke, and she's using a companion app we created that interfaces with the headset. So it transcribes what she's doing into his holographic display, and he can. And this is someone who's completely locked in. They can't even move their eyes. And so this is a rabbi, and the other guy was a CPA.
That's amazing.
And so their whole language model as a digital twin is unique to themselves. So the way that the first person spoke, he's a sarcastic, funny guy, and this guy is much more about prophetic kind of. And this is what it looks like on the inside. So the text at the top is what's captioned through speech to text using the microphone on the headset. And then the user can respond by initiating a syntactical word prediction to say, okay, I'm starting with a word. And then the AI matches up their personality and the way they communicate with situational cues to help accelerate the word completion or sentence completion. And then so you can see how much faster people can communicate because they have highly personalized AI language models as a digital twin with an intuitive interface that doesn't require them to peck out letter by letter things that they have to speak using a switch. So lastly, I'm just kind of sharing a bit of the progress since we've last spoken. We have a lot of world-class partners now. We've also been deeply involved in regulatory and neuroethics standards committees. So Cognixion is the only US delegate for the global standards for BCI at ISO and IEC in the SC43 group. So we're really carrying a great burden, I guess, in the sense of taking the knowledge we have around lived experience and the breadth of community input and user needs as well as building technology and engineering technology that works and sort of versus stuff that doesn't work and really sort of setting the bar on standards for BCI. And so, yeah, so this is really what we've been focused on. So, if folks that are in your audience listening to your podcast are interested in accelerating neurological innovation, feel free to reach out. I'm sharing my email if you want to go visit our website and learn more about the product. There's also a bit.ly here if you want to book a meeting. So that's the latest update here at Cognixion. So we've been very busy. We've been heads down. And so we have not been very active publicly because we've been so focused on accelerating this breakthrough work.
Yes, that's an amazing work. But how would you summarize the major innovations that you integrated into your BCI technology? What would those be?
That's a good question. I would say the system integration is an obvious piece. So being able to integrate these systems together in a high-speed closed-loop system. But really, the true innovation that scales beyond this device into future devices is our BCI Studio. So BCI Studio as a development environment, if you can imagine GarageBand or something like this, like an app where you can learn how to play and mix music without having a degree in music, that our API and SDK will eventually become like GarageBand for neuroscience. And as a result of that, we're hoping that there's going to be an emergent app store of clinically validated apps that are derived from using cognition technology to create validated apps. So those are sort of the keys to like what makes us extremely unique and valuable in the space. And our APIs allow for integration between any kind of other sensor. So we can take sensor data from an external sensor or an implanted sensor and combine it and synchronize the data from all these sensors with ours inside of BCI Studio. So I'd say that's extremely special. And our patents, I think, also make us very special in the sense that we saw this coming early on, the need for integration, the need for a closed loop system. So everything that we've just designed, we have patented, I guess, over the past 10 years. I think where some companies are now just starting to get the idea to sort of pursue this, like we have a lot of prior art that's been approved internationally and patents that have been issued for a lot of this underlying systemic work. And we have an openness to licensing. So anyone who is developing on our platform, we're totally open to structuring a licensing arrangement if folks want to license our technology in applications they want to build.
Thank you so much. How do you foresee the field developing? What BCI applications do you think will be next in line? Because like you mentioned today, there are only few neurological conditions that we're trying to address right now with the neurotechnology with brain-computer interfaces. So what do you see coming up next?
Well, I would really say like the brain is the new frontier. BCI is the new operating system. AR, VR, like metaverse, BCI, those are the tools that you have to learn to use and build for the future. If you look statistically at the business side of big tech, mobile phone businesses have plateaued. Desktop computers have plateaued. Laptops have plateaued. Tablets have plateaued. So either these big tech companies are going to shrink or they're going to be extremely motivated to continue to invest billions and billions of dollars into transitioning all of humanity to wearable computing. So that's where it's going. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen gradually as hardware becomes more sophisticated, as we can make things smaller and faster. You and I both wear glasses. So imagine that our headset is reduced down to a pair of glasses just like this. Like these are clear framed glasses. I think yours are too. Imagine that you could have clear framed glasses that have electronics embedded in them that you don't even see. You could have that kind of design flexibility for creating fashionable wearables. But the computing is so invisible that technology just disappears. That's where it's going. And it's not going to be an assault on your brain. I don't think people will tolerate having lots of augmented reality things jumping at them as they're walking through the world. So there's going to be a very high degree of filtering and settings and preferences that are going to be derived from the individual. So hyper personalization around filtering of what you want and what you want to control and what kind of applications you're going to have. And then the question will be, what are your input modalities for interacting with that information? And so a lot of that information may just be passive. So there's work that Google's doing right now on AR glasses for caption text, for speech to text for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, where you have just caption text that helps stay in pace with the conversation. But that could also be universal design. It's designed for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, but everyone would like to have caption text in noisy environments. So at some point, things that are designed for people with disabilities will be adapted for everyone else. So I'd say everything we're doing today at Cognixion will eventually be used by everyone in the world in some other way. Yeah.
Yeah, you built a platform that can be used, like you said, for virtually any condition. And for people with clinical disabilities, disorders, and healthy people as well.
Yeah. BCI today is mostly dominated with EEG use cases for like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, general wellness applications on the consumer side. And I would say the next wave of EEG for consumer will be like Neurable is doing a good job of making EEG sort of invisible. They could make it more invisible, but I think they wanted the little fabric, little stripes. They look like peppermint candies kind of in the fabric. They wanted to bring attention to that to launch it. But I would say if they just change the color of those sensors to match what the colors are around them, then you wouldn't even know that the headphones had EEG. And I think that's where it's going, right? Like that's a good example of technology that's seamlessly blending into everyday objects. Now, when you think about this, though, you're going to have passive information. And so you're going to have filters of information that you're going to want to be able to observe or turn off. Then you're going to have things that you want to interact with over like a time delay. So you might have things like a neurological feedback, kind of like Neurable in the sense that it's monitoring your attention and your anxiety or focus. So you might have little prompts that appear asynchronously that are like, you might want to take a break, And so these are going to be asynchronous things that are outside of healthcare, but they provide wellness use cases. So there's going to be an emergence of wellness applications like that are going to be useful. And then, so I'd say wellness, accessibility, and clinical like neurology use cases are going to be really the first wave of widespread applications. And then you're going to have other kinds of things that are going to follow that, such as gaming and other things that are more consumer, educational, biofeedback, neurofeedback, that are going to expand the usefulness. But I would say over the next 10 years, it's going to primarily be dominated with accessibility and healthcare use cases.
Thank you. And you also mentioned, I think it was very important, that your system is at least considered or referred to as standard for BCI system. And do I understand correctly that this is about the security of the system, the standards that we need to have in BCI systems for them to be secure so that there wouldn't be any breach of confidentiality, breaking into a device, stealing the brain data? If you can comment on that a little bit. So what are those main requirements and how your system meets them?
So there are different standards depending on the type of technology. If you're a consumer technology, you have to meet certain regulatory standards. If you're a research device, you need to meet additional levels of standards. If you're a medical device, you need to meet even higher standards. And so there are specific regulatory standards for cybersecurity, for medical research and medical devices that are much stricter where you have to have all kinds of procedures, documented procedures, standard operating procedures, infrastructure designs, like the way your architecture of your system, everything needs to be designed to not just meet the standard, but your whole business and your business processes have to be designed to meet the needs of those standards too, including your facilities and your servers and your infrastructure and the laptops that your employees use to develop your system. So the sheer magnitude of compliance or supporting cybersecurity issues for medical devices is way higher than consumer electronics. And so, for instance, there's a regulation called 21 CFR Part 820 and 21 CFR Part 11. These are specific standards that we have to meet. So if anyone that's listening wants to dig into it, you can go and read about these specific standards. It's really about cybersecurity preparedness. So it's not just we have encryption. It's not just encryption. And it's not just an armchair response data is being processed on device. And it's not just a shorthand we have a HIPAA compliant cloud infrastructure. There's lots of areas for penetration in between all of that. And so we have to think about the risk and probabilities of all of those kinds of conditions, which is also partly why our system, the BCI itself, has an electromechanical connection to the AR headset. So it's fully wired and integrated. So if we had a Bluetooth connection or a Wi-Fi connection between our EEG and the AR system, there's a point of penetration vulnerability there.
It makes total sense. And as we're at the end, my last question is, what do you see in terms of skills that are currently missing in people who are going into neurotech? What our listeners should pay attention to in terms of skill development to be with the wave of current developments?
It depends on if somebody wants to become a specialist and they want to go deep. I sort of look at this like the capital letter T. You've got a lot of depth, but then you have a lot of breadth. And so if you want to spend your career going really deep in a particular area, then obviously data science is really critical. Understanding decoding, encoding, understanding classification, understanding just neurotechnology, programming, computer science, building applications for biomechanical engineering, understanding circuits and understanding sort of the electrical aspects of your body is a circuit, and understanding that. If you want to have depth, but you want to start to spread out and have more breadth in your career, I would recommend sort of looking at the application stack. So working your way up. So not just focusing on the neuroscience, but working on applications and understanding how to first define a problem. What's the problem and what's the problem statement? How do you define it in a way that is as succinct as you can? And then thinking about developing skills beyond neuroscience into building apps in Unity, building in Swift or iOS, building in Android, not just doing things in Python, but actually building applications that can be commercialized. There's a lot of people that are doing interesting things, but they're very fragile. They build software that's only good enough to get published, but you could never actually ship. Whatever gets published, you could not actually reproduce that in a commercial way. And so knowing that there is a distinction between building something for publication versus building something for people to use, there's a whole next level of robustness and programming skills that you need to have in production. And one of the missing links, which I think is really unique to Cognixion, is going back to my original story, user experience design, UX design, human factors, and understanding that BCI by itself, it's not like the silver bullet. You need to do more than just one sensor. You need to be able to design user experiences or any kind of solution that can take data from multiple sensors and build inferences or biomarkers around sensor fusion. That's really going to unlock the BCI industry.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm sure our listeners appreciate all your insights, and there is so much to discuss. I'm looking forward to seeing you on our future podcast with your updates and all new information.
There's going to be lots of really interesting news about Cognixion in the first quarter. And we're very excited about next year. We really feel that 2025 might be the year for BCI to really become something big.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to your updates in early January. Thank you so much for being our amazing guest.
Finally,
Bye
thank you.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Dear Neurocareers podcast listeners, thank you for joining me and my incredible guests on this exciting journey into careers in neuroscience and neurotechnologies. I hope you've been inspired by the stories of those turning groundbreaking ideas into impactful realities. If you are looking for more guidance on advancing your neurocareer, book a free consultation with me, Dr. K, your podcast host and neurocareers coach at the Institute of Neuroapproaches, the only career service dedicated specifically to the needs of professionals in neurotech. Let's take the next step toward your neurocareer success together. In addition to free consultations, the Institute of Neuroapproaches offers a variety of services designed to help you thrive in neurotech. First, professional development planning. We help you create a tailored career development plan, identify knowledge gaps, and equip you with the tools needed to achieve your goals in neuroscience and neurotechnologies. Second, resume and cover letter review. Get expert feedback on how to craft documents that are specifically designed for job opportunities in the neurotech field. Third, interview preparation. Sharpen your interview skills through mock interviews and targeted feedback, including soft skills, hard skills in neurotech, BCIs, EG, MEG, live coding, and presentation preparation. 4. Networking and job search strategy. Learn how to effectively network and uncover job opportunities while standing out in the competitive neurotech job market. 5. Negotiation and salary advice. Receive expert guidance on negotiating salaries and benefits and determining a fair salary range for your desired position. All this and more can be found at www.neuroapproaches.org. Again, www.neuroapproaches.org. So, what are you waiting for? Let's navigate the path to success in the world of neurocareers together and turn the impossible into possible. We're looking forward to working with you.